Hello and welcome to Debate Clash. I'm Nico.
And I'm Michael.
And today we're going to be doing our brainstorming for the December 2016 Public Forum Resolution, which is resolved: the United States should end Plan Colombia. Now, we'll first start by going over an overview of what this topic is talking about, then moving into the affirmative and negative major arguments that you'll be seeing this next month.
So before we get into the overview, we just wanted to say thank you for all the new subscribers we've had. We've now over 800, which is awesome. We're super excited about it. We also wanted to remind you that we do have our Debate Clash shop on our website, debateclash.com/market. If you'd like to mention it to your coaches, have them go and purchase your evidence from there, that would be awesome. Help support us. We'd really appreciate that. Also, one other thing, in our research, we do use our Debate Clash research engine. It's essentially just a custom Google search engine, and we filtered it down to make sure you're getting legitimate sources and not having all of the kind of junk that you get on regular Google. So if you want to check out that, you're more than welcome to. Go to debateclash.com/researchengine.html.
Perfect, and so we'll just jump right into the overview, which is the reason why Plan Colombia was created. So for decades, Colombia has been breeding instability. There's several drug trafficking. They're the highest producer of coca, which is the main ingredient to produce cocaine in the entire world. They also have rebel insurgency groups, which are destabilizing the government, hurting people. They have got a lot of drug lords. So there's a lot of instability that was happening in Colombia that's been going on for decades, over 50 years. The U.S. didn't like this, right? We see the effects of this because there's instability and because there's cocaine being filtered into our country. So Colombia and the United States decided to get together and create something to prevent drug trafficking and also all of this violence that was occurring in Colombia. Now, it's important to remember that Plan Colombia, which was inspired by all of this, wasn't a unilateral movement. It wasn't the United States going into the Middle East and saying, we're here to help you and you're going to want our help. This was Colombia cooperatively working with the United States and wanting our assistance.
Exactly. And what Plan Colombia is providing to the Colombians, primarily, so it's primarily a military help, I guess, to Colombia. And what it does is it provides military training, weapons, and equipment to help with the Colombian military and police forces. Primarily emphasis there on training. A lot of what we're providing is trainers and training establishments to help their soldiers be able to combat the guerrilla warfare that's going on there. Now, the cost of this to the U.S. has been, since Plan Colombia was enacted in 2001, it's been approximately $10 billion that the U.S. has spent on these resources for Colombia.
Exactly, and so with Colombia, the reason why it's making headlines again is because there was a recent development. After 15 years of Plan Colombia being implemented, there finally was peace talks between this rebel group, right, the FARC, which is the main insurgency group, and the Colombian government. They were coming to a peace agreement. They signed the deal on September 26th. It was fantastic, and then on October 2nd, Colombia called a vote. They asked their citizens, do you agree to this? The exact wording was, do you accept the final agreement to terminate the conflict and build a stable and lasting peace? And the majority of the population voted no, right? They do not trust these insurgency groups. Interviews with the civilians there said that they felt like the government was being handed over to these insurgency groups by making this peace agreement. They're not punishing these rebel groups after they've been killing citizens for so long and doing drug trafficking. And so the people feel like there isn't enough of a harsh punishment to warrant them accepting this peace agreement. So the instability continues, hence the reason this topic is up for debate.
Yep, and with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the affirmative side of the argument. So we have three main points here. We have bad for the U.S., bad for Colombia, and then just some workarounds, things you might run into the round, and some frameworks that might help you out. So moving on to our first point under which is things that are bad for the U.S. And the first thing we have under there is the cost. So $10 billion, not a super small amount. It's going to have economic costs. We're going to let you come up with what the actual impacts are and really the impacts. Yeah, just figure out what the impacts are. So $10 billion, roll with that. If you want it to be one of your points, find some impacts and add that in.
Absolutely. And just expounding on that, make sure that you're not just telling the judge, this is $10 billion that we've spent, stop it now. Apply it to the world, apply it to the people of Colombia, apply it to the United States, have an impact.
Exactly.
And then the next argument that you can make under the section, bad for the United States to end Planned Colombia, or that it's bad for the United States, is the human rights violations. So the United States has been in Colombia, and some of the ways that they've tried to fight off these rebel insurgency groups is by starving them out. So they've actually controlled food and made sure that certain individuals don't get food. And this has directly affected the citizens. They have killed innocent civilians because of false positives, thinking that they were drug lords. In fact, a lot of the way that the drug trafficking works in Colombia is they have normal farmers that the crop that they produce is coca, but then these drug lords come in and they essentially forcibly take that product from them. And the United States is now forcing that poor innocent farmer that was already the picked on kid. And so all of these are bad human rights violations that are occurring. If we end Plan Colombia, these stop. So a lot of things that could happen from this is it could stop the hatred of the United States. We're no longer killing people. You can talk more about instability and how if the United States gets out, they'll stabilize by themselves, and other impacts like that.
Yeah, exactly. Now moving on a little bit from that. So you're going to run into, in your research, you're going to run into a lot of things that's saying like, sorry, I lost my train of thought here. You're going to run into a lot of things saying the problem has been solved, the amount of drugs has decreased by X amount, like that kind of thing. What you need to just make sure you're aware of is that the problem hasn't actually been solved. Colombia was the largest producer of coca plants, which produces cocaine in the world, and it still is. So really, a lot of the problem has just shifted around, where this farm was harvesting coca plants, now it's not. This other farm maybe, or it's maybe like, out back in just some random field somewhere, not even a farm. And so you just have to be aware that the coca still is being produced from Colombia. So just watch out there, and you can use that as a point if you'd like, that there is no real resolution that has occurred as far as the drug production is concerned.
Absolutely. And during our initial research, we also found a lot of articles talking about one of the reasons the United States did Plan Colombia is so that they could replicate it, so that they could test a theory of how we can solve instability in economies or countries that are collapsing. It's been 15 years and nothing has really happened, right? It's not solved. We're still involved in it, and they're still the highest producing coca country in the entire world. So you could expound this into other arguments. The United States can't replicate it, therefore they should end it, right? The trial is over. It failed.
Exactly. Another negative that's come from it is, so the U.S. has provided a lot of training to military and police personnel in Colombia. There have been a decent number of cases, I'm not going to say a number, you can research that for yourself. There have been cases where these trained soldiers and police officers have actually left the Colombian military police force and gone to anywhere in the world, really, and fought as mercenaries in other places. So you could swing this as a negative, that the U.S. is training essentially mercenaries that we may fight against in the future. Just as a side point there. Absolutely.
And let's move on to our second point. Unless you have anything else to add. Perfect. So the second point is why Plan Colombia is bad for Colombia. With this, the first argument you can make is that it has increased the amount of violence within their country. Now, everywhere we researched, there's subjective and conflicting statistics on this part, because violence is not necessarily the most quantifiable, and it determines where you did the where you did the study, how much population you observed, did you actually see all the crimes that were committed? So you're going to see conflicting statistics. So I would recommend knowing the methodology of any statistics that you run about violence increasing or decreasing. Furthermore, we also have to observe that when Plan Colombia was introduced, they were in the midst of peace talks. So the main rebel group was talking to the government. They were talking about peace agreements. Then the United States got involved and it ended it. So some might also argue that violence has increased because the United States has prolonged the war by getting involved.
Exactly. Along with that, if the United States is involved for too long, what we're going to see is a dependency built on the U.S. support by the Colombian government. And so what we need to be careful of is that we don't continue our support for too long. Now, what that is, it's arguable, but you could argue that we need to end the Colombian plan sooner, or the Plan Colombia, sooner, because we don't want to create this support or this, we don't want to make them dependent on us, essentially.
Exactly. They'll collapse if they're dependent on us
Exactly.
forever. And with that too, we also did a bit of research. It looks like our security within Colombia and the security of the Colombian forces has been very focused on drug trafficking and getting rid of these insurgencies. And because of that, other things have been neglected. So one of the things that we observed in our research was that illegal mining has sparked up. People are doing illegal things essentially because the focus is somewhere else. So I would highly recommend researching more into this and seeing what has been neglected in a security sense because of our focus on solving Plan Colombia, because of the goal of that policy.
Exactly. Now, this kind of goes back to what Nico was talking about with the human rights violations. So there are a lot of farmers, obviously, if it's the largest producer in the world of coca, there's lots of farmers farming coca, right? And what happens when the U.S., I guess, funded personnel come in and fumigate these huge coca fields and destroy all these crops that these people are farming? Obviously, they're going to lose profits, they're going to lose their lifestyle, and it's going to be really bad for them. What are they going to do after that? Then they have to come up with a new crop to grow, they have to replant it, like fresh new crops. It's not going to be worth as much as coca. There's just all these negatives, and so it's really bad for the farmers themselves. That we're constantly destroying their way of life, essentially.
Exactly, yeah, and so we're punishing the victim once again. The drug lords are coming to these people, just like the bully in school, and saying, give us your lunch money. And we're destroying it. We're taking away their lunch money, and so it's once again hurting the victim.
Exactly. Along with that, coca is super hard to get rid of.
Yeah, absolutely. So coca, one of the problems with it is that we were reading an interview with one of the farmers within Colombia who used to grow coca, and he says even though he eradicated it, it still kept coming back. In order to get it, you have to dig up every single root of the plant. The chemical's really hard to just get rid of it. So yeah, you really do have to dig it up from the beginning, so it is exceptionally hard to get rid of, and for these farmers to move to something else.
Right, and so this just kind of adds to the point where, first of all, we're destroying their livelihood by destroying the crops, and then if the farmers do want to move to something legal, it's incredibly difficult for them to do so without these like major actions by the government to like remove these crops.
And a lot of the time, the crop fields we just fumigated with horrible chemicals. So even if the coca grows back, all of that soil is bad for anything else they want to grow.
Right, so it's kind of just like a double negative there. The farmers lose. So just bring that up, that by us trying to force this out, they lose either way.
Absolutely.
In the current situation, so the peace talks are in progress. They signed the peace deal. Yes, the citizens are voted no to that peace deal. But the current situation is that the Colombian government doesn't need any more military support. We've trained their troops. We've given them weapons. We've given them equipment. They're in good shape right now. So why are we continuing this deal when they don't need the help anymore? What we should do is end the Plan Colombia and provide some sort of humanitarian aid to now help these farmers, these citizens that have been displaced, that have had their livelihoods ruined. Now they need help to rebuild the infrastructure in Colombia.
Right, and even our U.S. perception that everything needs to be solved by the military has definitely hurt Colombia, because now they're in a country after 15 years of the U.S. Military being involved, in which they think that they need military to solve every and all of their problems. And because of all this militarism, people have been displaced. There's a really good number from The Guardian. So if you go to the Debate Clash research engine and just type The Guardian Plan Colombia, it goes into more detail about these individuals that have been displaced due to the violence that is sparked from Plan Colombia. So I highly recommend researching into that. It's pretty bad for Colombia.
Yeah. So now moving on to some workarounds, onto our third point for the affirmative here. So the first one is, again, just humanitarian aid is going to be better than the military aid. So really, we really like that point, that we really think you should push that although they still may need some help, and the neg is going to argue this, they don't necessarily need military help. They need humanitarian help. And so we would really recommend pushing that as a point, that instead of doing X, doing Y. So even if it's not humanitarian, instead of doing military, do something else besides the Plan Colombia.
Absolutely. And then along those lines, because the affirmative does get to propose ending Plan Colombia, they can introduce concepts, and this is largely dependent on your judge, the type of debater you are, whether you can justify this or not, but you can propose these kind of alternatives, not as counter plans, but as, hey, this might happen if Plan Colombia ends. And one of these things is increasing border security, not building a wall like Trump says, but
border security in the U.S., not in Colombia.
That's right. Yeah, thank you for that. So border security within the United States, not necessarily like building a wall like Trump supports or anything, but we can beef up security. We can know, maybe we need more investigation, more private eyes finding out where these drug cartels are going, how they're coming into the United States, and then taking care of them that way. Or maybe beefing up security even around various states that have drug-related issues and tracking them down from there. There are a lot of alternatives that result in that. And, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, just think of what $10 billion could have done bolstering our own prevention measures for drug trafficking in the U.S. if we had spent it here instead of in Colombia.
And the reason for this as well, just so you're not thinking that we're randomly coming up with these things, it relates to the proxy argument that we make earlier, which is that when the United States went into Colombia, it simply displaced where the drugs were being created. A lot of them actually moved to northern Mexico. So a lot of the arguments that we're talking about are in relation to, we can't solve the problem by attacking Colombia.
Exactly. So now we want to just mention a couple frameworks here. So things you could, if you haven't seen the framework video that Nico did, check it out. It's awesome. It'll explain what a framework is, how to use it. But as a framework for the affirmative here, one of the ones we have is that if the affirmative shows there's a better option than Plan Colombia, then the affirmative should win the round.
The third category for the negative is the workarounds. And one of the first workarounds that, well, at least an observation that we should think about when debating this resolution, that Michael and I personally had an interesting time brainstorming with, which is, as the negative, you have to walk a middle ground. If you say that Plan Colombia was perfectly successful and that it's done, look at the peace talks, they're over with, their economy is stabilized, coca production is out the window, we're good, that means the affirmative now can just say, yeah, we should probably end it. The goal has been completed. Likewise, if you say Plan Colombia is horrible, it hasn't done anything, then the affirmative can say, yeah, we should end it. So the negative has a weird middle ground, but it's something to always think about within the round.
Exactly. Okay, so now moving on to the framework. So one framework we thought of here for the neg is that the AF must prove that Plan Colombia has fulfilled specific goals, namely drug trafficking and violence, in order for the plan to end. So if either of those goals haven't been met, we have to continue with the plan.
Exactly. Yeah, and along those same lines, this is kind of an extension of this framework, but also an alternative to it, which is that the affirmative has to prove that Colombia is fully sustainable without the United States. So without a doubt, Colombia is sustainable on its own. That is the only way for the affirmative to win, because otherwise, we're not doing anything.
So, now one observation here, and it's kind of has a framework type feel to it. So because the topic is specifically dealing with ending the Plan Colombia, basically what we noticed is that if the affirmative mentions other things, so if they say, yeah, let's end the Plan Colombia and provide humanitarian aid, it's kind of going against the resolution. So you could say that, like, to stay topical, to stay like on topic as the resolution specifies, we can only talk about ending the plan, not starting anything else. So just a thing to take note there with the wording of the resolution.
Absolutely, and that blocks out any alternatives that they can run. It's a very offensive, in a good way, type of argument. Well, another thing that you can also run with the workarounds is just an observation, once again, just looking at your entire case. We shouldn't pull out right now. So the affirmative is talking about, or the resolution is talking about right this second. So remember that. Remember that if the affirmative says, yeah, Plan Colombia is coming to an end, we should pull out within the next year. You can say that's negative ground. Like, obviously, we don't think that this plan, this policy should carry on for decades and decades and decades. We're just saying right now, the work is not accomplished. It is not done. That is a 7-month-old baby that's almost at its 9 months, almost ready to come out. Don't pull the plug now, otherwise bad things happen.
Exactly. So thank you so much for watching this debate clash video. Hope it helped you out with the topic. Hit the upvote, the like thing,
and the subscribe
under the video. Yes, and subscribe.
And make sure to tell your coaches too. Debateclash.com/market will bring you to the marketplace where you can buy champion briefs, debate doctors, and all sorts of fun goodies.
Exactly. And one last note. Remember the research engine. It really helps us. Check it out. See if it'll help you out. We'd love it if you used it. So again, thank you so much.